I abandoned my Down syndrome baby in 1982. Now she's standing at my door, and I can't breathe. I never thought I'd see her again. For 42 years, I told myself she was better off without me, that someone else had given her the life I couldn't. But yesterday, a woman with almond-shaped eyes and a familiar smile knocked on my door in Austin, Texas, holding a faded hospital bracelet and a photograph of me at 23. My legs went numb, my throat closed, because the daughter I left at St. David's Hospital in 1982 had found me, and she wanted answers I wasn't sure I could give. Before I can explain how all this happened, it's very important that you like and subscribe to the channel. That will help us a lot. Only then can we continue. Our future is in your hands. Now let's get back to this incredible story. My name is Margaret Ellen Cooper, but everyone called me Maggie back then. I was born and raised in a small neighborhood on the east side of Austin, where the houses were close together, and everybody knew your business before you did. My parents were hard-working people who believed in discipline, church on Sundays, and keeping up appearances no matter what was falling apart behind closed doors. I was their only daughter, the one they expected to marry well, have children the right way, and never bring shame to the family name. But life had other plans for me. In the summer of 1981, I met a man named Daniel at a county fair. He had dark eyes, a dangerous smile, and promises that felt like freedom. I was 22, working at a diner, and desperate to feel like more than just another face in a small town. We spent 3 months together before he disappeared without a word, leaving me with nothing but a positive pregnancy test and a future I wasn't ready for. When I told my parents, my father didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. My mother cried every night in the kitchen, whispering about what the neighbors would say, about how I had ruined everything. They wanted me to go away, have the baby quietly, and give it up for adoption before anyone found out. I agreed because I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified, alone, and convinced that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I gave birth on a cold February morning in 1982 at St. David's Hospital. The moment they placed her in my arms, I felt something I wasn't prepared for. She was tiny, warm, and perfect in a way that made my chest ache. But within hours, the doctors came in with serious faces and careful words. They told me she had Down syndrome, that her life would be difficult, that she would need constant care and resources I didn't have. My parents stood in the corner of that hospital room with expressions that said everything without speaking. This was not the grandchild they had imagined. This was not the life they wanted for me or for themselves. I was 23 years old, broke, ashamed, and drowning in fear. So I made a choice that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I signed the papers, walked out of that hospital, and never looked back. I told myself she would be adopted by a loving family, that she would have a better life without me, that I was doing the right thing. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was running. I was abandoning my own child because I was too weak, too scared, and too selfish to fight for her. For 42 years, I carried that guilt like a stone in my chest. I never married, never had other children, and never stopped wondering what happened to the baby girl I left behind. And now, she was standing at my door, alive, real, and waiting for me to explain the unexplainable. The days after I left the hospital were the darkest of my life. I moved back into my parents' house and pretended like nothing had happened. My mother told the neighbors I had been visiting a sick aunt in Houston for a few months. My father went back to his routine of reading the newspaper at breakfast and ignoring me completely. Nobody talked about the baby, Nobody asked how I was feeling. It was like she had never existed. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her little face, her tiny fingers curled around mine, the way she looked at me in those first few hours before I gave her away. I told myself that the adoption agency would find her a good home, that some kind couple would love her the way I couldn't, that she would grow up happy and safe. I repeated those words over and over until they became a prayer I didn't believe. I went back to work at the diner 2 weeks later. My boss, an older woman named Dolores, asked me if I was feeling better. I lied and said yes. I smiled at customers, poured coffee, and took orders like I had never been pregnant, like I had never held my daughter in my arms and then walked away. But inside, I was hollow. Every time I saw a mother with a baby, my stomach twisted. Every time I heard a child laugh, I wanted to disappear. Months passed, then years. I tried to move on. I dated a few men, but none of them lasted. I told myself it was because I was picky, but the truth was I didn't deserve to be loved. I didn't deserve a second chance at family. I had made my choice, and I had to live with it. My mother died in 1995, and my father followed 2 years later. Neither of them ever mentioned the baby again. It was like she had been erased from our family history, a secret we all agreed to bury. By the time I turned 40, I had built a quiet life for myself. I worked as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm in Austin, lived alone in a modest apartment, and spent my weekends reading or walking around Zilker Park. People thought I was just a single woman who had never settled down, someone who preferred solitude over the mess of relationships and family. They didn't know that I woke up every morning with the same question haunting me. Where is she? Is she okay? Does she hate me? Does she even know I exist? I thought about hiring a private investigator once, but I couldn't go through with it. What would I even say if I found her? How could I explain that I had abandoned her because I was too scared and too ashamed to be her mother? What right did I have to walk back into her life after all those years? So I did nothing. I stayed silent. I convinced myself that she was better off not knowing who I was. But guilt has a way of growing inside you, slowly, steadily, until it becomes part of who you are. I started going to therapy in my 50s, hoping it would help me let go of the past. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, asked me once if I had ever tried to find my daughter. I told her no, and she asked me why. I said because I didn't deserve forgiveness. She looked at me for a long time and then said something I would never forget. Forgiveness is not something you earn, Margaret. It's something you allow yourself to receive. I didn't understand what she meant back then, but I think about those words a lot now, especially after what happened yesterday. Because my daughter didn't come to my door to punish me. She came because she wanted to know the truth. And maybe, just maybe, she came because she needed to forgive me, as much as I needed to forgive myself. The years between 1982 and 2024 were long and heavy. I watched the world change around me, while I stayed frozen in the same guilt, the same regret, the same endless loop of what if and if only. I saw other families grow, other mothers laugh with their daughters, other women become grandmothers with pride and joy. And every single time, I felt the weight of what I had lost, what I had thrown away, what I could never get back. I never celebrated Mother's Day. I never bought baby clothes or imagined what my daughter might look like as she grew up. I pushed those thoughts away because they hurt too much. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the world felt too big and too empty, I would lie in bed and whisper apologies into the darkness. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hope you're okay. I hope someone loved you the way I should have." And now, after 42 years of silence, she was here, standing at my door, real, alive, looking for answers I wasn't sure I could give. If you've ever struggled with a decision you regret, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our pain helps us heal. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where nothing special was supposed to happen. I had just gotten home from work, kicked off my shoes, and was about to make myself a cup of tea when I heard the knock. It wasn't loud or urgent, just 3 soft taps that made me pause. I wasn't expecting anyone. I rarely had visitors. I opened the door and there she was, a woman in her early 40s with shoulder-length brown hair, glasses, and a nervous smile. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a canvas bag over her shoulder. For a moment, I didn't understand why she was looking at me like that, like she was seeing a ghost. But then I noticed her eyes, almond-shaped, soft, familiar in a way that made my heart stop. She said my name. Margaret Cooper. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was afraid I might disappear. I nodded, unable to speak, and then she said the words that shattered everything I had spent 42 years trying to bury. "My name is Emily. I think you're my mother." My legs went weak. I grabbed the door frame to steady myself. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. She reached into her bag and pulled out a faded hospital bracelet, yellowed with age, with my name written on it in blue ink. Next to it was a photograph, a Polaroid of me at 23, holding a baby in a hospital bed, my face pale and exhausted, my eyes empty. I don't know how long we stood there in silence. It felt like hours. Finally, I managed to whisper, "How did you find me?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that carries years of unanswered questions. "It took a long time," she said, "but I never stopped looking." I invited her inside because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were shaking as I closed the door. She sat on my old couch, the one I had bought at a thrift store 10 years ago, and placed the photograph on the coffee table between us. I stared at it, at the girl I used to be, at the baby I had given away, and I felt like I was rustling through time. Emily told me her story, and I listened, silent and stunned, as my entire understanding of the past 42 years crumbled. She said she had been adopted by a couple named Robert and Linda Hayes, who lived in a suburb outside of Dallas. They were good people, she said, kind and patient, and they never hid the fact that she had been adopted. They told her from a young age that her birth mother had loved her but couldn't take care of her, and that she had been given up so she could have a better life. But Emily said she always felt like something was missing. She didn't blame her adoptive parents. She loved them deeply, but there was a part of her that wondered about the woman who had carried her for 9 months and then let her go. When she turned 18, she asked her parents if she could search for me. They supported her, helped her contact the adoption agency, and began the long, complicated process of finding answers. "It wasn't easy," Emily said. "The records were sealed, and the agency was reluctant to share information. But she was persistent. She hired a private investigator, submitted DNA tests, and spent years piecing together fragments of my life. She found old hospital records, traced my parents' names, and eventually discovered that I was still living in Austin, working quietly, alone, and carrying a secret I had never shared with anyone. She said she almost gave up several times, She wondered if I even wanted to be found, if I would reject her all over again, if opening this door would only bring more pain. But something kept pushing her forward. She said she needed to know why. Why had I left her? Why had I never come back? Why had I disappeared from her life before she even had a chance to know me? And now, sitting across from me in my tiny apartment, she was asking me to explain the unexplainable. I looked at her, at this beautiful, strong, fully grown woman who had survived without me, who had built a life despite my absence, and I felt a wave of shame so deep it nearly drowned me. I wanted to tell her that I was young and scared, that I didn't know what else to do, that I thought I was giving her a better chance. But those words felt hollow, like excuses that could never justify what I had done. So instead I started from the beginning. I told her about Daniel, about my parents, about the fear and shame that consumed me when I found out I was pregnant. I told her about the hospital, about the doctor's diagnosis, about the way my parents looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. I told her that I was 23 years old, broke and terrified, and that I made a choice I would regret for the rest of my life. Emily listened without interrupting. Her face was calm, but I could see the emotions flickering behind her eyes. Sadness, anger, confusion, maybe even pity. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the one question I had been dreading for 42 years. Did you ever think about me? I looked at her, and for the first time in decades, I let myself cry. Every single day, I whispered, every single day of my life. What would you do if you were in Emily's position? Would you forgive or would you walk away? Let me know in the comments, and please hit that like button if this story is touching your heart. Emily stayed for 3 hours that first day. We talked about everything and nothing, filling in the gaps of 4 decades with words that felt both necessary and impossible. She told me about her childhood, about how Robert and Linda had taken her to therapy and specialists, how they had fought for her education and her independence, how they had never treated her like she was broken or less than. She said she had gone to a special school until she was 12, and then she was mainstreamed into a regular classroom with support. She struggled with reading and math, but she loved art and music. She played the piano, painted watercolors, and eventually found work at a non-profit organization that helped adults with disabilities find employment. She was proud of her life, and she should have been. She had accomplished things I never thought possible when I held her in that hospital room 42 years ago. But as she spoke, I couldn't stop thinking about all the moments I had missed. Her first word, her first day of school, her first heartbreak, her first triumph. I had given all of that away because I was too afraid to fight for her, too weak to believe in her, too selfish to stay. And now, sitting across from this incredible woman who had built a life without me, I felt the full weight of my failure. She asked me about my life, and I didn't have much to say. I told her about my job, about my quiet routines, about the apartment I had lived in for 15 years. I told her I had never married, never had other children, never built the kind of life people dream about. She asked me why, and I couldn't give her a straight answer. The truth was, I didn't feel like I deserved those things. I had abandoned the only person who ever really needed me, and I spent the rest of my life punishing myself for it. Emily looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't anger. It was something softer, something sadder. She said, "You've been carrying this for so long, haven't you?" I nodded, unable to speak. She reached across the table and touched my hand, and I flinched because I didn't expect kindness. I didn't think I deserved it. Before she left that day, she asked if we could meet again. I said yes, even though I was terrified. She said she wasn't sure what she wanted from this, that she wasn't ready to forgive or forget, but that she needed to understand. I told her I would answer any questions she had, that I owed her that much. She smiled, hugged me briefly, and walked out the door, leaving me alone with the echoes of a past I could no longer hide from. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I met several times. We had coffee at a quiet cafe near the university, walked through Zilker Park, and sat on benches talking about everything we had lost and everything we were trying to find. She told me more about her adoptive parents, about how Linda had passed away from cancer 5 years ago, and how Robert was now in his 70s, living in a retirement community in Dallas. She said Robert had encouraged her to find me, that he believed everyone deserved to know where they came from. I asked her if she resented them for telling her the truth, and she said no. She said they gave her the tools to face the world with honesty, and that included facing the woman who had given her up. I asked her if she was angry with me, and she paused for a long time before answering. She said she used to be. When she was a teenager, she would lie awake at night, imagining all the reasons why I had left her. She wondered if I was cruel, if I was selfish, if I simply didn't care. But as she got older, she realized that life was more complicated than that. She said she didn't know if she could forgive me yet, but she was trying to understand. That word, understand, became the foundation of our fragile new relationship. Emily didn't owe me anything, not her time, not her forgiveness, not her grace. But she kept showing up, kept asking questions, kept giving me chances I didn't deserve. And slowly, painfully, I began to tell her the whole truth. I told her about the shame I carried, about the way my parents made me feel like I had ruined their lives, about the doctors who talked about her like she was a burden. I told her about the social worker who said adoption was the best option, that special needs children needed specialized care, that I was too young and too unprepared. I told her that I believed all of it, because I was desperate to believe it, because it gave me permission to walk away. But I also told her the truth I had never admitted to anyone, that I was terrified of her, terrified of what her life would be like, terrified of failing her, terrified of becoming the kind of mother who resented her own child. I told her that I didn't trust myself to love her the way she deserved, so I convinced myself that someone else would do it better. Emily cried when I said that. She said, "You didn't even give yourself a chance." And she was right. I didn't. I ran before I could fail, and in doing so, I failed in the worst way possible. Have you ever walked away from something because you were afraid of failing? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe and share this video with someone who might need to hear this story. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I continued to meet, but the conversations grew heavier. She started asking harder questions, the kind that forced me to confront the darkest parts of myself. She asked if I had ever tried to find her, and I had to admit that I hadn't. She asked if I had thought about her on her birthdays, and I said yes, but I also admitted that I had never reached out, never sent a card, never tried to know if she was okay. She asked if I regretted it, and I told her the truth, every single day. But regret doesn't undo the past. It doesn't erase the years of absence. It doesn't heal the wounds I caused. Emily said she knew that, but she also said that regret was a starting point, not an ending. She told me that she had spent years wondering if I ever thought about her, if I ever cared, if I ever wished things had been different. And now that she knew the answer, she wasn't sure what to do with it. She said forgiveness wasn't something that happened overnight, that it was a process, a choice she had to make over and over again. She said she was trying, but it was hard. I told her I didn't expect her to forgive me. I told her that I didn't deserve it, that I had made my choice and I had to live with the consequences. But she stopped me and said, "This isn't just about you, Margaret. This is about me, too. I need to forgive you so I can move on. I need to let go of the anger and the questions so I can live my life without carrying this weight." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. For 42 years, I had carried my guilt like a burden I deserved to bear. But I had never considered that Emily was carrying a burden too. The burden of not knowing, of wondering, of feeling abandoned by someone who was supposed to love her unconditionally. I had thought about my pain, my regret, my shame. But I had never fully grasped the depth of hers. Emily told me that she had a good life, that Robert and Linda had loved her fiercely, that she had friends and a job she cared about. But she also said there was always a piece of her that felt incomplete, a hole shaped like the mother who had walked away. She said she used to imagine what I looked like, what my voice sounded like, whether I ever thought about her. And now that she knew, she wasn't sure if it made things better or worse. I asked her what I could do to make it right, and she said, "You can't. There's no undoing the past, Margaret. But you can be honest with me. You can show up now, even though you didn't show up then. You can stop hiding." So that's what I did. I stopped making excuses. I stopped trying to justify my choices. I stopped pretending like I had done the right thing. I owned my failure, my cowardice, my selfishness. And for the first time in my life, I let someone see the full, broken, imperfect truth of who I was. Emily and I started meeting more regularly. She introduced me to her life, not as her mother, but as someone who was trying to earn a place in it. She took me to her apartment, showed me her paintings, played me songs on her piano. She introduced me to her friends, people who loved her and supported her, people who had been there when I wasn't. She told me about the challenges she faced, about the way the world sometimes treated her like she was invisible or incapable, about the frustration of being underestimated. But she also told me about the joys, the small victories, the moments of connection that made life beautiful. She said she didn't want pity. She wanted to be seen for who she was, not for what people assumed she couldn't do. And I saw her. I saw the strength, the resilience, the grace she carried despite everything. I saw the woman she had become, not because of me, but in spite of me. And I realized that my biggest regret wasn't just that I had abandoned her. It was that I had missed the chance to know her, to be part of her life, to witness the incredible person she had grown into. One evening, as we sat in her apartment, Emily asked me a question that changed everything. She said, "Do you think you could have loved me back then, if you hadn't been so afraid?" I thought about it for a long time, and then I said, "I don't know. I want to say yes, but I was so young, so lost, so convinced that I was doing the right thing. I think I loved you the only way I knew how, by letting you go." Emily nodded slowly, and then she said, "Maybe that's the saddest part. You thought you were saving me, but you were really just running from yourself." And she was right. I had spent my entire life running, hiding, pretending like I could outrun the guilt. But guilt doesn't disappear. It just waits, quietly, until you're ready to face it. Where are you watching this from? Are you going through something similar? Let me know in the comments. Your story matters, and I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like this video if it's resonating with you. It's been 6 months since Emily knocked on my door, and our relationship is still complicated, still fragile, still full of unanswered questions. But it's also real. She doesn't call me Mom, and I don't expect her to. That title belongs to Linda, the woman who raised her, who fought for her, who loved her when I didn't. But Emily does call me Margaret, and sometimes, when we're sitting together in comfortable silence, I feel like maybe that's enough. We've had hard conversations, the kind that leave both of us exhausted and tearful. She's told me about the nights she cried as a child, wondering why I didn't want her. She's told me about the anger she carried for years, the questions that haunted her, the fear that maybe there was something wrong with her that made me leave. And I've had to sit with that, to accept that my choices didn't just affect me. They shaped her entire understanding of herself. But we've also had beautiful moments. She took me to an art show where some of her paintings were displayed, and I stood there, staring at the vibrant colors and bold strokes, feeling a pride I had no right to feel but couldn't suppress. She played the piano for me one afternoon, a song she had written herself, and I cried because I realized I had almost missed this, all of this, because I had been too afraid to stay. Emily told me recently that she's started therapy to process everything that's happened. She said it's helping her make sense of the past, to separate the story she told herself about me from the reality of who I actually am. She said forgiveness is a journey, not a destination, and that some days are harder than others. But she also said that she's glad she found me, not because it erased the pain, but because it gave her answers. And answers, she said, are better than silence. I've started therapy too, Doctor. Patel has been helping me work through the guilt, the shame, the years of self-punishment. She's teaching me that I can't undo the past, but I can choose how I move forward. She's teaching me that forgiveness, including forgiving myself, is not about forgetting what I did. It's about accepting that I'm human, flawed, and capable of change. I've also started volunteering at the same non-profit where Emily works. I help with administrative tasks, organizing events, and supporting families of adults with disabilities. It doesn't erase what I did, but it feels like a small way to honor the life Emily has built, to contribute to the community that supported her when I didn't. Emily and I have talked about the future, about what our relationship might look like as we continue to heal. She's made it clear that she doesn't need me to be her mother. She had a mother, and she was wonderful. But she's open to me being part of her life in whatever way feels right for both of us. Some days that means coffee and conversation. Other days it means space and silence. And I've learned to accept that, to let her set the pace, to follow her lead. The hardest part of building something new with Emily has been learning how to navigate the boundaries she sets. There are days when she calls me and asks if I want to meet for lunch, and my heart leaps with hope. But there are also weeks when I don't hear from her at all, and I have to remind myself that silence doesn't mean rejection. It means she's processing, healing, living her own life. I've had to teach myself patience in a way I never had to before, because this isn't about what I need or what I want. This is about respecting the space Emily requires to make sense of everything. She once told me that having me back in her life felt like opening a door she had kept locked for decades. She said it was liberating and terrifying at the same time, because once that door was open, she couldn't control what came through. Memories, emotions, questions, all of it came flooding in, and some days it was too much. I understood that, or at least I tried to. I had spent 42 years avoiding that door entirely, but Emily had spent her whole life standing in front of it, wondering what was on the other side. We've developed a rhythm, tentative and unspoken, but real. On Saturdays, we sometimes meet at a small cafe near the university. It's quiet, tucked away from the main streets, and the owner knows Emily by name. She always orders the same thing, a vanilla latte and a blueberry muffin, and I've started ordering the same, not because I particularly love it, but because it feels like a small way to connect, to share something simple and normal. During those Saturday mornings, we talk about ordinary things. She tells me about her week, about the people she works with, about a painting she's working on, about a song she heard on the radio that reminded her of something from her childhood. I tell her about my job, about the books I've been reading, about the small moments that make up my quiet life. We don't always talk about the past, and I'm grateful for that. Sometimes we just sit in silence, sipping our coffee, watching people walk by. And that feels like progress, too. But there are also days when the past comes rushing back without warning. Once we were walking through a bookstore and Emily stopped in front of a children's section. She picked up a picture book about a little girl and her mother, and she stared at the cover for a long time. I could see the emotions flickering across her face. Sadness, longing, something I couldn't quite name. She put the book back without saying anything, but I knew what she was thinking. She was imagining the childhood we never had, the bedtime stories I never read to her, the moments we lost because I chose to walk away. I wanted to say something, to apologize again, to tell her how much I wished I could go back and do things differently. But I've learned that not every moment needs words. Sometimes the best thing I can do is just stand beside her, acknowledge the pain without trying to fix it, and let her feel whatever she needs to feel. One afternoon, as we walked through the park, Emily asked me if I thought I had changed. I told her I didn't know, that I was trying, but that I still carried the weight of what I had done. She stopped walking, turned to me, and said, "You know, Margaret, I think the fact that you feel that weight means you have changed. The woman who left me in that hospital 42 years ago wouldn't have cared enough to carry it." Her words hit me hard, and I realized she was right. I wasn't the same person I was at 23. I had spent decades drowning in regret, but I had also spent those years learning, growing, and facing the truth of who I had been. I couldn't undo the past, but I could choose to be different now. I could choose to show up, to be honest, to try. Emily continued walking, and I followed, my mind racing with everything she had just said. It was the closest thing to forgiveness I had received from her. Not a declaration, not an absolution, but an acknowledgement that I was trying. And maybe, in some small way, that was enough for now. I thought about the woman I had been at 23, scared, ashamed, desperate to escape. I thought about all the years I had spent punishing myself, convinced that I didn't deserve redemption. And I thought about the woman I was now, flawed, broken, but finally willing to face the truth. We reached a bench near the pond and sat down. Emily watched the ducks glide across the water, their movements smooth and effortless. She said, "Do you ever wonder what my life would have been like if you had kept me?" I felt my throat tighten. I had wondered that 1,000 times, but I had never let myself fully explore the question because the answer was too painful. I told her the truth, every day. But I also wonder if I would have been a good mother, if I would have given you the life Robert and Linda gave you. And honestly, Emily, I don't think I would have. She turned to look at me, her expression thoughtful. She said, Maybe not. But you'll never know, will you? And that's the hardest part. You made the choice before you even gave yourself a chance. I nodded, unable to speak, because she was absolutely right. I had decided I would fail before I even tried, and in doing so, I had guaranteed my failure. Emily and I are still figuring out what our relationship looks like, and maybe we always will be. There are no easy answers, no neat resolutions, no happy endings that erase the pain of the past. But there is something else. There is honesty, effort, and the fragile beginning of healing. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. We've started creating new traditions, small rituals that belong only to us. Once a month, Emily takes me to her workplace, and I get to see the incredible work she does. She helps adults with disabilities find jobs, build skills, and gain independence. Watching her in that environment, confident and capable, interacting with people who respect and admire her, fills me with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Pride because she is extraordinary, and sorrow because I almost missed this, all of this. One evening, Emily invited me to her apartment for dinner. It was the first time she had done that, and I was so nervous I almost didn't go. But I forced myself to show up, to walk through that door, to sit at her table and share a meal with her. She made spaghetti, simple but delicious, and we ate while soft music played in the background. It felt surreal, almost too normal. Like we were two people who had always known each other, instead of two people trying to rebuild something that had never existed. After dinner, Emily showed me a photo album Robert and Linda had made for her. It was filled with pictures of her growing up, birthday parties, school events, family vacations. She narrated each photo, telling me stories about the people in them, the moments captured, the life she had lived. I listened, my heart aching, because I wasn't in any of those pictures. I was a ghost, an absence, a blank space where a mother should have been. But then Emily turned to the last page, and there was the Polaroid of me holding her in the hospital, the one she had brought with her the first day we met. She had placed it there, at the end of the album, like a bridge between her past and her present. She said, "I wanted you in here too, not because you were there, but because you're part of my story, whether we like it or not." I stared at that photo, at the young woman I used to be, and I felt a wave of grief so intense it nearly knocked the breath out of me. I had spent so many years running from that moment, but here it was, preserved in a photograph, undeniable and unchangeable. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand, and for the first time since she had walked back into my life, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were both going to be okay. I know that not everyone will understand why Emily chose to find me, or why she's giving me a chance I don't deserve. Some people might think she should walk away, that I forfeited my right to be in her life the moment I signed those adoption papers. And maybe they're right, but Emily didn't come looking for me to punish me or to give me absolution. She came because she needed to know the truth, and because she believed that understanding the past was the only way to move forward. There are moments when I see doubt in her eyes, when I can tell she's questioning whether this was the right decision. There are days when she pulls back, when the weight of everything becomes too much, and I have to remind myself that this is her journey, not mine. I can't control how she feels or what she decides. All I can do is be here, be honest, and let her lead the way. As for me, I've stopped running. I've stopped hiding. I've stopped pretending like I can bury the past and move on. I've accepted that I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life. But I've also accepted that guilt doesn't have to define me. I made a terrible choice 42 years ago, but I'm making different choices now. I'm showing up. I'm listening. I'm trying. And in those small, fragile moments when Emily looks at me and smiles, when she shares a piece of her life with me, when she lets me sit beside her in silence, I feel something I haven't felt in decades. I feel hope. Not hope that the past can be erased, but hope that the future, however uncertain, might hold something worth living for. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It's about making space for the future. Emily and I will never get back the years we lost, but we have the chance to build something new, something honest, something real. And that, I've come to realize, is more than I ever thought I deserved. So if you're reading this, if you're carrying a secret, a regret, a choice you wish you could undo, I want you to know that it's never too late to face the truth. It's never too late to stop running. It's never too late to try. You might not get the ending you want, but you might get the one you need. And sometimes, that's enough. Emily is teaching me that healing is not a straight line, that some days are harder than others, that forgiveness is a process, not an event. But she's also teaching me that love, real love, is not about perfection. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about being honest even when it hurts. It's about trying even when you're not sure you'll succeed. And so, 6 months after my daughter knocked on my door and asked me to explain the unexplainable, I'm still here, still trying, still learning, still hoping that maybe, just maybe, I can be the person she deserves me to be, not as her mother, but as someone who finally chose to stay. What do you think about Margaret's journey? Do you believe people can truly change, or is some damage too deep to heal? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. And if this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way through. If you want to see more emotional, real-life journeys like this one, click on the next video. You won't regret it.